Hello there and welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon, your guide to the wider Star Wars canon through the comic book lens. And to take you on this journey, I'm your host, Mike Burton. And so brings episode 35, and for this one I'm going to be speaking about 3 Age of Republic stories, 2 of which are their own comics, and one of them is a short one contained within the Age of Republic special. So for clarity, every one of these stories is going to be written by Jody Houser, but the artist and the colourist change slightly. Also, all 3 of the stories within this can be found in the Age of Republic Villains trade paperback, which was out in May 2019, and the full Age of Republic hardback, including Villains and Heroes, was out February 2020. Now for clarity, once I've done this episode, there will only be one more Age of Republic episode to do, and then I will have done all of the Age of Republic stories. For clarity, the Age of Republic stories are all just one-shot, either comics or stories about characters from the prequel era, hence Age of Republic. The next one I'll be delving into is going to be Age of Rebellion, which is the original trilogy, and then the third and final one is the Age of Resistance, which is the sequel trilogy. All of them just have one-shot stories about the main characters, generally a few kind of slightly more side characters, and each one has a special, and the special normally has 3 shorter stories in there as well. So this week I'm going to be tackling Jango Fett's story, which features Boba Fett as well, which I think is fairly apt given what's going on with The Mandalorian. Then it's going to be the General Grievous story, because it's just cool. And then it'll be the Asajj Ventress story, which is contained in the Age of Republic special. And she's a character, if you're unfamiliar, who is in the Clone Wars. And so that will be... After I've done this, it means that I'll have done all of the Age of Republic villains, because in episode 2, all the way back, I did an episode about Darth Maul, and within that I spoke about the story in which his Age of Republic story is. And then episode 26, I did an episode about Count Dooku, which within that as well, it had his story in it. And then a few episodes ago, in episode 31, I did the Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Age of Republic stories, which obviously they will fall under the Heroes category. The remaining ones I'm going to be tackling, probably in about a month's time or so, is going to be the Anakin Skywalker story, the Padme Amidala story, and then the remaining 2 Age of Republic stories, one of which features Mace Windu, and the other one features Rex of the 501st, who is a clone, and Jar Jar Binks. So with each of these, when I speak about the character within the story itself, I'm also going to give some background information and stuff about them, like a mini character profile. Now, a lot of these characters who are in these Age of Republic things, some of them have got like hundreds and hundreds of pages of backstory, and the other ones haven't got as much. Now, these 3 don't have a huge amount, except for what is in either the movies or primarily the Clone Wars series. General Grievous and Asajj Ventress are very central characters in the Clone Wars series. There's a lot of information about them in there. I'm not going to go through all the bits and pieces of information about them in there because I'll just be here all day. So if you want some additional information about them, go and check out Clone Wars. However, Jango Fett, there's not a huge amount of information about him in the canon. There is a fair amount in Legends and stuff, but obviously in this show I just stick to the canon just to make sure, hopefully, things in the future, if you're listening to this in 5 years down the line, everything is still going to be still confirmed, whereas obviously if I go into the Legends details and something comes up in the canon that contradicts Legends, it just makes everything far too confusing. So the Jango Fett Age of Republic story, it is called Training. It was out January 2019. It, as I said, was written by Jody Houser. The artist is Luke Ross and the colorist is Java Tartaglia. The story takes place a little bit before Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, so it's likely around 22 years before the Battle of Yavin, maybe it's 23 years before the Battle of Yavin. Attack of the Clones took place 22 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Clone Wars lasted 3 years, and then Revenge of the Sith happened 19 years before the Battle of Yavin. And obviously when that all happens, and you get 19 years, and that's when they blew up the Death Star, which is the sort of main time frame that people outside the Star Wars universe can, basically, is the easiest way to do timelines. And just for clarity, at present in the canon, now I want to clarify this may slightly change due to The Mandalorian, but from what we know, Jango Fett and also subsequently Boba Fett are not Mandalorians. They do wear Mandalorian armor, and Jango Fett claims that he was actually born on Concord Dawn, but the claim is not necessarily... It's one of those things where he said it, but there are some doubts around it. Concord Dawn is in the Mandalorian sector, and it's in Star Wars Rebels, actually, and you may recognise it because it's a planet that looks like it's been blown apart, as in half of it is kind of disappearing and being pulled off into space. It looks incredible as art, but, going there is pretty horrendous. For clarity, Obi-Wan does personate a character called Reiko Hardine in one of the Clone Wars arcs. He is also apparently from Concord Dawn. And for clarity regarding the Mandalorian thing, the Mandalorian government does not call Jango Fett a Mandalorian. He is referred to as a mercenary, but he is also considered the best bounty hunter of his time, and also he was, as many people should be aware, the template for the clone army, as how he was introduced in episode 2, and the actor who plays him, Tamula Morrison, he also plays Commander Cody in episode 3, and obviously Cody is a clone of him. It also appears that Boba Fett was around 10 years old at the time of Attack of the Clones, when he saw Jango Fett get killed by Mace Windu. So in this story, he's anywhere between the age of sort of 8 and 10, generally around the age that Anakin Skywalker was in Phantom Menace as well, and that kind of gives you a vague idea of how old he's going to be in Mandalorian, which would make him around 40, 41 years old or so at the time of Mandalorian. So, with all that information out of the way, let's get into the story itself. So, as I said, the story is actually called Training, and I'm just going to read the small crawl for this. Jango Fett is one of the most feared bounty hunters in the galaxy, a cold-blooded and ruthless assassin who always gets the job done, no matter what it takes. If Jango's past had been built on violence and destruction, what's left to build his future? So this all starts on the planet Telarath, which is not elsewhere in the canon, but it was in Legends a bit. And essentially it's got 3 characters, one of which is a Rhodian, one of which is a Gand, and one of which is a Chadra fan. I'm not going to mention their names because, frankly, they just don't show up anywhere else, and it's much easier to refer to them as their species, which may be considered racist in the Star Wars universe, but just so you guys have kind of a better idea of some of the names and things of some species, it's probably just easier this way. So the Rhodian, a Rhodian famous one would be Greedo. He's probably the most famous Rhodian. There's some in Rebels, there's some in Clone Wars. They're relatively everywhere. They're quite a common species. Green skinned generally, with very big eyes, 2-letter antenna on their head. Yeah, that's a Rhodian. A Gand is slightly less common. One of the most famous Gands is probably Zuckuss. Zuckuss is one of the many bounty hunters that was aboard the Star Destroyer in Empire Strikes Back. They kind of look like bug things almost. They got quite big eyes and they normally have breathing apparatus and things. And there's also a type of droid which is the LOM, the LOM series, and they're ones which I've mentioned previously in these episodes, which their structure and their general face and everything like that were constructed with inspiration from the Gand species. And a famous bounty hunter is 4-LOM, who is also found on Empire Strikes Back's Star Destroyer. Now, for clarity, there is an ongoing series at the moment which is called Bounty Hunters, and it's got Boba Fett in it, it's got Bosk, Zuckuss, 4-LOM, Valance, it's got lots of people in there. That, if you want more information about them, check that out. I'm not going to be tackling the Bounty Hunters comic for quite a while because they're only on like issue 7 at the moment. So if I did one of them, I'd do one arc and then you wouldn't hear any more for months and months. But if you want more information on Bounty Hunters and things, as well as Mandalorian and all the other jazz, there are a few episodes in Clone Wars that kind of go about these things, and I think there's 1 or 2 in Rebels as well, but the Bounty Hunters comic is probably a best shout. So the third species is a Chadra fan. They're basically small bat beings. They're about 1 or 2 feet tall. They're furry. They just look like bats, kind of, but instead of wings, they have arms. They can talk. They can speak common as well, as can the Gand and the Rhodian. And although there is a Chadra fan in A New Hope, I believe it's in the Cantina, they are kind of sprinkled about the canon. There's some in Clone Wars, some in Rebels, some in Resistance. The most prominent one is actually probably in Star Wars Resistance. It's a character called Orca, and he runs the workshop. As I've said previously, I wouldn't necessarily recommend Resistance that much. I'm now on Series 2, and there's only 2 series of it, and it's definitely nowhere near as good as Clone Wars and Rebels. I am starting to warm to it, but it is aimed at a much younger audience and just doesn't really have as much substance as I would personally like. But if you're desperate to find out what a Chadra fan looks like, and for some reason don't want to Google it, watch an episode of Star Wars Resistance and you'll see Orca in the workshop, he owns it with another species and another character, and they seem to be a gay couple, but it's kind of hinted hinted less so than spoken about. And I think that was just quite cute. So, yeah. You got a Rhodian again and a Chadra fan at a bar. They're waiting for Jango Fett. And while they're waiting, they kind of have a discussion, and it's mentioned that he's getting enough money from a mystery client to be able to retire, but he stays being a bounty hunter. One of them comments on, still having that itch. Jango shows up, and he brings Boba with him, and all the bounty hunters with him are very surprised at why he's bringing a child, and he says it's just all part of his training. They fly in Jango's ship on the way there, which is the Slave One, and Boba is in the cockpit with Jango while the others, I assume, are in the hold or somewhere else on the ship. And Boba asks why didn't Jango want to work with other famous bounty hunters such as Cad Bane, Aurra Sing, or Zam Wessel. Zam Wessel is the shapeshifter that you see in Attack of the Clones, who works with Jango Fett and then he kills her because she's about to reveal something. It's when Obi-Wan and Anakin are basically chasing her down and find her in the street. And Cad Bane, he is very popular in the Clone Wars. He is in, I think, the movie as well as the series. He's pretty scary, and he's got like a hat on, essentially a cowboy hat on, really, and a breathing apparatus or something like that. And then Aurra Sing, she's a white-skinned bounty hunter. You get to see her very, very briefly for a few seconds in Phantom Menace, but aside from that, she gets mentioned as Beckett kills her in Solo, Star Wars story, and once again, she is in the Clone Wars quite a lot. There's quite a few arcs where Boba Fett is in the Clone Wars with Aurra Sing and Bosk and sometimes Cad Bane and stuff, just kind of him training being a bounty hunter with the passing of his dad. And Jango says to Boba, well, the reason for not going with anyone famous is the unknown factor. That's the real lesson. Because Boba already knows how Cad Bane, Aurra Sing and Zam Wessel all operate and how they work, but working with people who you don't know makes them more unpredictable, so you kind of stay on your feet a bit more. And Boba says, but you could take any job. And Jango says, yeah, that is correct. But he wanted to show Boba that you can't just get any job you want when you start being a bounty hunter. You have to earn it. You have to build up a reputation to be able to get to the point that Jango is at for being so famous or infamous that you can take on any job. There are a couple of flashbacks in this comic, sort of back and forth. One of them is on the moons of Bogdan. And really, it's only shown in this comic and in Attack of the Clones. Once again, I think it's explored in Legends a bit more. But the Moons of Bogdan is where Dooku spoke with Jango Fett and basically offered him loads and loads of money to get his genetic template to be used for the clones in the Grand Army of the Republic. And that is where Jango said, look, I want an unaltered clone. Because for clarity, clones that were in the Clone Wars, they had growth acceleration. So when they were created, it meant that they aged twice as fast. That is just so when they want to train them, obviously, to be in the army, if they could be, say, 18 years old to be able to fight, they'd only have to raise them for 9 years, which, compared to 18 years is quite a big saving. But Boba Fett is an unaltered clone, so it's just basically the same as Jango Fett, except Jango was born, in air quotes, natural from what we can tell, and obviously Boba was a clone. When he is speaking with Dooku, Dooku says specifically that he needed someone with Jango's skill, his discretion, and also someone who is human, because Jango kind of questions why him specifically has been chosen. Then it comes back to air quotes present day, and they're on a planet called Ord Mantell, where they're tracking Twi'lek, which is Aayla Secura is a Twi'lek, Hera Syndulla is a Twi'lek. In Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, there's a Twi'lek sort of dancing, and she tries to kind of attack Jabba a little bit by pulling the chain, and he drops her in the Rancor pit. Also, Bib Fortuna, he is Jabba's kind of right-hand man, in a sense, in Episode 6. He's the one that Luke does a Jedi mind trick on, and he kind of lets Luke in. He's pink-skinned, red-eyed, and has the tentacles. Yeah, Twi'leks are very common in the Star Wars universe. They're seen in... I wouldn't say they're seen in every single film necessarily, but they're seen very commonly. They are often seen as, I wouldn't say lower class citizens necessarily, but they are often strippers or have jobs which are a bit more shady, things like that. In the Clone Wars, there is an arc about, there's an attack on Ryloth, and then in Star Wars Rebels, one of the characters, Hera Syndulla, one of the greatest pilots the Rebellion has ever seen, she's a Twi'lek. Sometimes I say Twi'lek, sometimes I say Twi'lek, so I apologise for that. But there's a whole batch of arcs with her and her dad and Ryloth and stuff, so quite common. And for clarity as well, Ord Mantell is a place that is mentioned a fairish amount in the canon, kind of in passing. It is mentioned in Empire Strikes Back, and it is also shown in the Son of Dathomir comics, which is the Darth Maul comics. So they track the Twi'lek, and essentially it's a daughter of someone who's rich. She's trying to run off with this guy who's in love with her, and her dad wants her back. So they manage to track her, and then they find them at a balcony, and they threaten her lover and say to him, look, either we kill you or you can run. He very quickly runs, which is probably the wise thing to do when you've got several bounty hunters surrounding you. So when he runs away, she says that she doesn't want to go back. She stands at the edge of the balcony and is basically saying, no, I don't want to go back. And she falls. As she falls, Jango Fett manages to catch her, because Jango Fett wasn't actually there. He was sort of hiding, in air quotes. He obviously has a jetpack, so he was waiting. He kind of had the suspicion something like that was going to happen. The Gand and the Chadra fan bounty hunters are a bit agitated by that, because they feel like they did all the work of kind of finding her, pushing her, getting her near the edge, and he's just getting the credit for catching her. So they're walking back to the ship, and the Chadra fan jumps on the back of Boba holding a knife, basically threatening Jango Fett, saying, look, you give us the girl, we get the full bounty, and we let your son live. The Rhodian is going, oh my god, guys, what are you doing? Stop. And they point a gun at him, and he just kind of stays neutral. He kind of takes a step back and says, okay, whatever. It then has a flash to Kamino, where Jango is just speaking to the Kaminoans about the clone army. They're saying that he should be really proud of it and all the things they've done, and Jango doesn't really seem to care that much. He says, look, this is your creation, not mine. I'm not fussed, basically. Then it flashes back, and Jango isn't going to help out Boba. He just stands there and watches. And then Boba manages to struggle a little bit and pull out a blaster and shoots the Chadra fan. Then quickly, as the Gand is kind of fumbling by surprise, Boba then shoots the Gand as well. And then Boba and Jango start discussing whether or not they should let the Rhodian go or whether they should kill them. Boba then basically says to the Rhodian that he'll allow him to live as long as he forfeits his part of the bounty to them, and he can leave. The Rhodian quickly accepts that and runs away, and then Boba Fett and Jango are speaking in the Slave One, kind of flying back, presumably to collect their bounty. And Jango kind of questions what his thought process was for that. And Boba says that he let the Rhodian go, not necessarily because he thought he was innocent. He did feel like he wasn't colluding with the other two. He wasn't going to try and assassinate them or anything like that. But he also didn't specifically help them, so he's not in the best of light in that way. But he actually said that one of the reasons he really let them go, not even for the money, was actually so he could go and tell others of what he saw. That even Boba Fett, as a child, is ruthless enough to kill 2 bounty hunters. And that helped him build his reputation even from an early age, and that is where the comic ends. And I just want to say a little tiny bit of information about Jango Fett's armour. It's not actually fully known where Jango Fett's full armour actually went. We believe that Boba Fett had it. Once again, this is in the canon. We believe that Boba Fett sort of had it. Boba Fett's armour is not Jango Fett's armour. For a long time, I thought it was just Jango Fett's armour that got basically rusted, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And also, in one of the episodes of the Clone Wars, Boba uses Jango's helmet to try and kill Mace Windu. He puts a bomb in it and plants it on a ship that Mace Windu is on, and then, tries to assassinate Mace Windu, because obviously Mace Windu was the person who killed Jango Fett in front of Boba Fett by beheading him in the Geonosis arena. And so that's the Jango Fett one-shot. Next up is the General Grievous one-shot. Now, I would say that this is probably my favourite of the 3 here. I don't really know what my favourite one-shot is of all the Age of Republic comics. I do really like the Qui-Gon Jinn one that I've tackled previously, because that gives some really cool insight into sort of the Force and things. But I do also really like the Dooku one, because that does give some insight into Dooku's past life, which isn't really tackled that much in the canon. Or rather, at the time of me reading it ages ago, it wasn't. But the General Grievous one is really interesting. It's quite different, and, I really like things to do with the Force and stuff like that, and this is fairly Force heavy, which is quite interesting considering that Grievous is not Force sensitive. So a little bit of background information and whatnot about this. So General Grievous was actually initially created by George Lucas to kind of foreshadow Vader, in a sense to kind of show that, Grievous is basically cyborg, and the only things that are not robotic are his major organs. Obviously you see his eyes, you see his heart, which Obi-Wan shoots. There's certain other aspects of him, and one of the reasons that he always has a cough, which is actually George Lucas's cough. I think he had bronchitis or something at the time of doing some of the sound and whatnot for Star Wars the prequels, and he had a bad throat. They thought that would be a good shout, so it's George Lucas coughing for Grievous's cough in the film. I'm not 100% sure what it's like in the Clone Wars. I think it's a bit more hazy, but I just thought that was quite cool. Essentially, so Grievous was kind of created to sort of foreshadow Vader in some ways, because obviously Vader is just a torso and a burnt head, and his limbs are all robotic, while Grievous is just his organs. And I just want to mention as well, I've tackled the Vader Down comic previously, which I think was on episode 19 of Star Wars Comics in Canon. There's a character within that which is called Carbin, which is a Mon Calamari, and he has basically a Mon Calamari head and some organs on an upgraded version of Grievous's body, essentially. It's quite a cool thing in the comics. It's a really fun thing to see, especially because a lot of the artwork and stuff for it is really cool, but I want to pop that out there too. Also, Grievous was really first introduced in the original Clone Wars cartoon series, which is now Legends. It's the one which also introduced Asajj Ventress. As I said, it's no longer canon, and I think it's made by the guy who made Samurai Jack as well. They're quite a bit of fun, but they're quite weird and inconsistent. There's certain parts that are just mental in a really good way, and other parts that are not as much. But yeah, Grievous has got a fair amount of backstory to him in Legends, but not as much in canon. For clarity, he is the species a Kaleesh. His name was previously Qui-Gon J. Shilal. I may be pronouncing that wrong. And Kaleesh often wear masks and things. They're red-skinned, they're reptilian, but they are also humanoid, and they're a species that are found in wild space. So they're not that common in the universe. There are a few here and there, and there's a character called Crimson Corsair who is in The Force Awakens briefly, and he is wearing a mask, which is a Kaleesh mask. General Grievous's head, where his eyes are in, that is basically a Kaleesh mask, but with his eyes kind of fused into it as well. And for clarity, the Crimson Corsair, to our knowledge, is not a Kaleesh either. It's just his helmet is kind of that style. But they are a warrior race of people. They do not generally have mercy. They're quite fearless and things, but in canon, we don't really have that much information about them. We don't know how old Grievous is, and he seemingly became a cyborg after a sort of shuttle accident. And there is also a lot of stuff as well which he tried to kind of upgrade himself. In Legends they go into a lot more detail about this, and it is slightly different, but from what it kind of seems to be is he was very badly wounded in a shuttle crash. He had to repair himself to some degree, or someone had to do some sort of repairs to him, and then he just continued trying to, in air quotes, upgrade himself to make him this even more fearsome warrior. I know that in Legends one of the reasons for him kind of trying to improve himself was because he was one of the top warriors on his planet, and then he came into contact with the Jedi who could use the Force. Grievous can't use the Force, and therefore he felt it was some sort of unfair advantage, and it was kind of like cheating in a way, which in Legends is one of the reasons why he hates Jedi so much. Once again, that is Legends, but it's not necessarily contradicting the canon. It's more so just we haven't got an explicit reasoning why he hates the Jedi as much as he does. So, yeah. Another few things in the canon, he learnt battle tactics during a war with these species called the Yamri. The Yamri are giant praying mantis things that you can see one of them in A New Hope in the cantina, and he basically hated the Republic for years because they sided with the Yamri, and that kind of stirred the pot a lot. That's what made him, his people had to fight a war. The Republic took the other side, and obviously that's one of the reasons he hates the Republic as well. And that obviously would contribute to one of the reasons why he hates the Jedi. As I said, the reason for his cough is due to organ irritation, so him basically becoming almost cybernetic as a cyborg. That is one of the reasons. And he is in the Clone Wars series a lot. He is like him and Asajj Ventress, as well as Dooku, are the main antagonists in the Clone Wars. There's a lot of really cool fight scenes with him in there, and there's one specific episode which I want to highlight, which is called Lair of Grievous. It is in series 1 of the Clone Wars. It is one of the very few episodes in Clone Wars that I actually really recommend to people. I'd probably say it is one of the best episodes. It's probably one of the best standalone episodes in all of Clone Wars, and it's definitely one of the top episodes in series 1. As I said before, most people who are trying to get into Clone Wars, I would say skip the movie. It's not worth it. Skip basically all of season 1 of the Clone Wars except the episodes Rookie, Lair of Grievous. The one before Lair of Grievous kind of feeds into it, so it is kind of a two-parter, but the Lair of Grievous episode introduces Kit Fisto into Clone Wars, and you get to hear his really cool smooth Jamaican accent, which is a lot of fun, and he fights Grievous, which is always badass. And the Lair of Grievous episode, you get to see a bit more into Grievous. You see some statues of what he kind of looks like before some of the cybernetics changes, and also you get to see like stages of his cybernetic change through the statues. But yeah, that's more or less the information we know about Grievous. As I said, there is a lot more stuff about him in Clone Wars, but that's less backstory stuff and more just him doing crazy things and, going mental. So this comic, this one shot, is called Burn. It was released in March 2019. It was written by Jody Houser, the artist is Luke Ross, and the colorist is Java Tartaglia. Basically the same as Jango Fett, but it came out a little bit after that. Now, I'm just going to read the crawl for it. Once again, the crawls in these comics are not that huge. So, the Clone War rages. The Jedi Order leads the armies of the Republic in battle against the endless separatist droid legions. The Jedi may have finally met their match in the fearsome and merciless General Grievous. Countless Jedi have fallen to Grievous' blades, but no matter how many Jedi he slaughters, nothing can sate the cyborg's appetite for destruction. I also wanted to add that the writer for this, Jody Houser, she said that this comic is generally, in her mind, it takes place after the Clone Wars episode I mentioned, Lair of Grievous, so it's probably around between episodes Season 1 and Season 2 of the Clone Wars, that sort of era, so quite early on in the Clone Wars, much nearer 22 BBY. But that is not like 100% confirmed objective canon. Something may pop out in the years to come that might slightly change that, but that's generally where it is at the moment. So it starts on a place called Ladiv, which is not elsewhere in the canon. There's a Jedi and a Padawan which are basically being hunted by General Grievous. He quickly makes short work of both of them and recovers a data pad that shows a hidden Jedi temple. For clarity, one of the Jedi is a Mickeyan, and the most renowned Mickeyan would probably be in the Clone Wars once again, and there's two twins, Tipli and Tiplar, and Tipli and Tiplar, one of them is killed by essentially a clone when an inhibitor chip goes bad, and then another one is killed by Maul. So both pretty unpleasant deaths, ways to go, but they both of their deaths, in the silver lining way of looking at it, spark really, really cool arcs in Clone Wars, and are two of my favourite arcs in Clone Wars, which is the inhibitor chip sort of Fives arc, and the anything to do with Maul. I bloody love Maul, he's amazing. So yeah, anyway. Grievous goes into this Jedi temple and he notices a lot of these Jedi statues and stuff, and he basically starts to destroy them with his lightsabers, mocking them and things. He says that they're not earned, in a sense, and it does like a little flash and it shows like one of his statues, which you get to see in Lair of Grievous. I'm not sure that he really earned them either, but he used to be a very proud warrior and when he was before a cyborg and stuff, so it's probably along those lines. The next few panels are Grievous getting through multiple different traps, which obviously are designed for Force users, but he's got gadgets and stuff. He can climb on walls, he can jump fairly high over stuff. He has like a grapple hooky thing that he can shoot out of his wrist, which he uses in Revenge of the Sith when Obi-Wan and Anakin confront him on the Invisible Hand ship, just outside of Coruscant right at the start, and he says, "You lose, General Kenobi," and then he blows up the window and flies out, and then uses his grapple hook thing to kind of catch on and walk to an escape pod. That's the thing he uses. So there's quite a few cool panels of him kind of dodging and jumping out of the way of spikes and all kinds of other jazz. And he comes to a room with this big sort of green thing in the middle. What it seems to be is like a waterfall, but it's like a really giant cylinder of water falling. It's like a fluorescent green colour, and there seems to be this blue light thing in the centre of it. So he walks up to it and he puts his hands through it, and then he can't feel it any longer. Now he can normally feel his hands and things like that, and he puts his hands in and he can't actually feel anything when his hands are inside the water, which confuses him a bit. So Grievous decides to climb in, because why not? And then he starts to float in this weird spacey area, and then his flesh seems to grow back. He looks the way he did before he went through all these cybernetic enhancements and things. And I have taken a photo of this, and I will be posting it on my Instagram, which should be up the day of this release, which will be Saturday the 21st of November. If it's not, it might be up the 22nd of November. I do apologise for that if it is a little bit late, but I've taken a photo just because it's a really cool scene, and you just get to see Grievous before he was cybernetic. So he's floating in this sort of dark void, in a sense, and there's this voice that is speaking to him, or potentially it's multiple voices, but they're saying things like, "Have you come seeking knowledge, truth, or power?" And he says, "I need nothing from the Jedi except the destruction." And then this other voice is like, "Destruction, yes, you're seeped in it. You've brought destruction upon yourself." And it says that you seek to destroy a power you don't comprehend. You have carved away your own connection to it, replaced it with parts whose strength you believe you understand. But your understanding is not strength, it is small. And as this is going on, he's looking around kind of shocked as he's like got all his flesh and things back, and his arms and limbs start to kind of slowly float away from him and things, and he can't really seem to grab them, reattach them, and eventually he gets reduced just down to the things he's left, which are his eyes, brain, and major organs. He then kind of dives and falls out of the water, and in anger he starts to slash at this waterfall with his lightsabers and things frantically. It doesn't do anything, unsurprisingly, so he leaves the temple and then contacts his ship, which was in orbit. He basically tells them to barrage it, like do an airstrike artillery from space, and to destroy the temple. And one of the little droids says to him, are you sure? I mean, the amount of power you're asking is far too over the top. You don't need to use all this power to destroy just a small temple. And one of the other droids whispers to them, look, you don't want to anger him, just do it. And it's like, okay. So this huge amount of like space barrage and like things basically destroying this temple, reducing it to rubble. And he looks at it and kind of is satisfied that the entire thing is just this crumbled, destroyed wreckage. And the final panel is him walking away from it. And once he's kind of away, you see the blue light, which we could see right inside the sort of waterfall-y thing that was kind of faded there. You just see that blue light kind of shimmering things as the comic ends. So it shows that he's trying to just use brute power and destruction and all these things to destroy things. And he doesn't really fully understand what connects the universe. And the whole point of that, it really a Force vision. What that was trying to show him was that he's cut himself away from the Force, he's made himself cybernetic for all this power, and really it's actually made his connection weaker, and therefore he is just small. He obviously doesn't like being told that, has a hissy fit, blows up the temple and bails, but whatever power is in there still remains. And that is where that comic ends. And so the final story, which is about Asajj Ventress. It can be found in the Age of Republic special comic, which, as I said, has got her story, a story about Mace Windu, and then a story featuring the clone trooper Rex, that also has Jar Jar Binks in it. The writer is once again Jody Houser, but the artist for this is Carlos Gómez, and the colorist is Dono Sánchez-Almara. It was released in January 2019, and once again it is included, as well as the other two stories, in the Villains trade paperback that was out in May 2019, and the full Age of Republic hardcover featuring all of the stories, which was out in February 2020. Asajj Ventress is a character which is basically only in the Clone Wars. She is in the Jedi Dooku Lost audio drama. She is also in the Dark Disciple book, and things that reference the Clone Wars, she is mentioned quite a bit. She is a pretty central character to the Clone Wars. She's one of my favourite characters in the Clone Wars. She has had a pretty tragic life, and is, especially as it goes on, you start to feel more and more sorry for her of sort of how she dealt with this. She is a Dathomirian Night Sister and a Zabrak, so basically the same general species as Darth Maul. However, because she is a female and a Night Sister, she doesn't have horns or any of that sort of other things, but she does have either some degree of facial markings or facial tattoos. I think there are more facial markings in this manner. She's completely pale-skinned, and for clarity, her being a Dathomirian Night Sister, she was one of Mother Talzin's clan. Mother Talzin is probably the most powerful Dathomirian Night Sister. There's a whole massive amount of backstory to do with her. She's in the Son of Dathomir comics. She's in the Clone Wars a lot. If you've played Jedi Fallen Order, they kind of touch upon what goes on there. But essentially, in the Clone Wars, there is an arc where the Separatist army goes to Dathomir and for revenge ends up killing almost all of the Night Sisters and things. And Asajj Ventress blames herself for that. She started off as a Night Sister, then when she was around 5, she was taken by a criminal away from her clan. She was a slave for a bit, but her master was, she said, kinder than most, so still pretty bad, but not horrendous, I suppose. And then she gets saved by a Jedi called Qui-Gon, who is a Jedi who spends about 10 years training her in the ways of the Jedi, and basically raises her in a lot of ways and kind of teaches her about the Force and all that sort of other jazz. And then eventually some raiders come, they kill him, and then she taps into the dark side of the Force for the first time and kills all of them. And then shortly after that, Dooku finds her, uses her as a Sith assassin. So obviously the Sith, there's always the rule of two, a master and an apprentice, but also the Sith often do use people as tools. So they don't really teach her that much about the dark side or anything like that. They just kind of use her and manipulate her to use her dark side abilities and her strength of the lightsabers and things to do a lot of her dirty work. If you've seen Star Wars Rebels or if you've played Jedi Fallen Order, there's beings that are called the Inquisitors, or the Inquisitorius. They're essentially dark side users trained by Darth Vader and Palpatine to do a lot of the dirty work, to go around doing Jedi hunting and things, but they're never trained enough or given the respect enough to really be powerful to be able to beat Darth Vader, or especially not Palpatine. And the similar sort of thing happens with Asajj Ventress. Dooku is Palpatine's apprentice, and Dooku trains Asajj to try and, help out. That's what Palpatine wants. And then she becomes a bit potentially too powerful, and Palpatine says, look, if you keep training this way, she may end up being more powerful than you, and if that happens and she kills you, then I'll take her on, but I assume you don't want to do that, so I would strongly recommend that you dispose of her. So these are I'm basically scaling over loads and loads of Clone Wars episodes and things. There's a lot going on here and stuff. I'm trying not to do too many spoilers or anything like that, but just to get a vague backstory of her. And so she goes through all that sort of stuff. She gets banished by Dooku and he tries to kill her. She goes back to Mother Talzin and the Night Sisters after probably a decade and a half of being away from them. The Separatists chase her down, kill a lot of her clan. She escapes again, and then for the final sort of year or so, maybe ending of the Clone Wars, she just becomes a bounty hunter. She still has her lightsabers, obviously still force sensitive and things, and she just wants to make her way in the universe. And that is where the story picks up. And this story, it is in the Clone Wars, Series 5, Episode 19. There is an episode where, let's say that the Republic are after Ahsoka Tano for one reason or another, and therefore a bounty gets put out on her, and this comic starts with her seeing there's a bounty out on Ahsoka Tano, and her kind of questioning why that is, because her and Ahsoka have fought numerous times when she was on the side of the Separatists, so it's quite a... That is almost like a prequel to an interaction that Asajj and Ahsoka have in the Clone Wars in arguably the best arc in all of Clone Wars, except maybe the last arc of Series 7. It is an incredible arc. I don't want to say anything else about it because it is just brilliant. You want to experience it for yourself. But yeah, as I said, most information about her is in Clone Wars, Dooku Jedi Lost, and the Dark Disciple book. And as this is part of the Age of Republic special, it is quite a small story. I have taken a photo of one of the panels, which is probably the coolest panel in the whole of the special. It looks really, really nice. And it's her just kind of having a vague flashback of her life up to that point. The art of it is incredible. I can't really stipulate that enough. So if you want to see what that looks like, check out my Instagram and you'll be able to see it. And as I said, the story is quite brief, so I'm just going to kind of go through it. So the title crawl part, as I said, the story is called Sisters, and it says... After narrowly surviving Count Dooku's betrayal and the destruction of her people by the Separatists, the fearsome Asajj Ventress is forging a new path. She may no longer be a dark apprentice, but she's as deadly and determined as ever. Right, so let's get into the story. In the lower levels of Coruscant, Asajj Ventress brings in this dying bounty to the guy who basically takes in the bounties and things. He kind of makes some sort of comment about, it was meant to be alive. And she's like, well, he is alive right now. And he's like dying on the table. And she's like, do you want to argue with me? And the guy's like, nope, that's fine. Here's your money. And then she sees this board with Ahsoka Tano sort of showing on it. And it's got a bounty. And she's questioning what on earth happened there, has a little flashback about her interaction with Ahsoka, and then decides that she's going to try and find Ahsoka, because if she can, she can bring Ahsoka to the Republic, she may be able to make things right in the eyes of the Republic, because basically she's been manipulated her entire life, especially by Dooku. It goes into a bit more detail in Dooku Jedi Lost, and it's pretty horrendous. He tortures her essentially until she does what he wants, and obviously he wants her to do his dirty work, and so she does all this stuff that makes her bad in the eyes of the Republic. She hears a girl sort of in trouble and kind of seeks it down and finds a large Weequay attacking two Zygerian girls. I've mentioned Zygerians in the past. They're kind of like feline humanoids in a sense. They're in the Clone Wars as well and a few other places here and there. And a Weequay is, once again, they're in quite a lot of stuff. The most famous Weequay is also one of my favourite characters in all of Star Wars, which is Hondo. He is a pirate. He is brilliant. He is in Clone Wars. He is in Rebels. He is also, if you go to Galaxy's Edge in America, I believe him and Chewie kind of do the Smuggler's Run Millennium Falcon ride. He's just such a cool character. I absolutely love him. He interacts with Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, and in Rebels he interacts with Ezra Bridger quite a lot. I just want to see him in way more stories. He is also in the Galaxy's Edge comic anthology series that I tackled many episodes ago. He has some sort of thing with Dok-Ondar, and he ends up interacting with Chirrut Imwe, which is the blind monk from Rogue One. It's a really cool anthology series, the Galaxy's Edge one that I did tackle a while ago. But yeah, Hondo is just, I love him. He's just so cool. I can't big him up enough. But anyway, this thing is basically a giant Weequay, which is the same species as Hondo. And the Weequay is attacking these two young Zygerian girls, trying to steal their food. Asajj Ventress sees all this and is thinking about walking away, but then she basically then decides to help them out, having a little flashback and seeing of all the horrible stuff that happened to her, and thinking that she remembers what it was like to feel alone and to be young and scared. So she attacks this Weequay who's trying to mug them, essentially, cuts his arm off, he runs, and she gives the girls his vibro knife. and they offer her some food, just say thank you and things, and she's like, no, you guys keep it, I don't need it, you have the food, just, try and take care of each other, that's the most important thing. And then she leaves to go find Ahsoka, and the thing that she's wearing and the area that she's in, minutes if not hours later, she finds Ahsoka, and that is in season 5 episode 19, and that is in 19 years before the Battle of Yavin. So right near the end of Clone Wars, there's not far till Revenge of the Sith from there. But that is that story. I really hope you guys enjoyed all 3 of those. As I said, that's now the villains one all finished. I'll mention in the show notes where you can find the other episodes, but as I said, it was episode 2 with the Darth Maul things, and episode 26, which was Dooku, and that is the remainder of the villains ones. I will be tackling the heroes, the remaining heroes ones, in a few weeks' time as well, which will be Anakin, Padme, and the other 2 other 2 stories in the Age of Republic special. And yeah, these were all quite, Clone Wars sort of centric ones, so go check out the Clone Wars. And as I said, skip all of Series 1, apart from the episode Rookies, Lair of Grievous, the very last episode, and then I think there's also a small arc about Ryloth, which isn't bad if you fancy checking out that. But I keep saying to people, with Clone Wars, I love it, but even I skip almost all of Series 1 because it is just not that great. There are a couple of really good episodes in it, but it isn't amazing. And if you want if you want to find out, if you want like a little episode guide, just contact me on social media at Genuine Chit-Chat, or email me at Star Wars Comics in Canon, and I can just send you a list of the best episodes from Series 1 and some really good ones in Series 2. I would generally say pretty much like most of Series 2 is really good. There are a few naff episodes, but from Series 3 onwards, it is brilliant. I wouldn't say there's really that many bad episodes from Series 3 onwards. Series 4 onwards, I'd say, is near perfect, as in it's just really consistent and some absolutely cracking episodes. But yeah, that's really it from me, guys. In the show notes, I've included details of other stuff I've been involved with recently, both on Comics in Motion and in my other podcast, Genuine Chit-Chat. Lots of other crazy collaborations and other things I've been up to. So check out all the other shows on Comics in Motion. It's a lot of fun hanging out with these guys and doing lots of collaborations and stuff. And follow me on Instagram and Facebook, Twitter, and you can see more photos of these comics and things. Anyway, guys, that is enough from me. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, I'll speak to you next week, and may the Force be with you.